Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagulu. Now to Afghanistan's tumultuous 2021 and its uncertain future beyond. Few nations have endured a more turbulent year, but the country's woes are far from over. Afghans are still stumbling to make sense of the Taliban's astonishing return to power, and women in particular are bearing the brunt of their oppressive policies. Meanwhile, the economy is teetering, an avalanche of hunger is looming, and international donors face a dilemma as 2021 comes to an end amid great agitation for the country. Can both the Taliban and foreign powers strike a delicate balance in the months ahead? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line by the Middle East analyst, Dr. Saul Zadka. Great to see you, Dr. Saul. Merry Christmas, best of the season. And of course, we're talking about Afghanistan, a country you have watched avidly in the last decade, possibly more. And this has been a very big year for Afghanistan, hasn't it? Tell us about the events you observed about that country.
At the moment, you can regard Afghanistan as a hell on earth, and I don't exaggerate. The country is suffering from unprecedented economic meltdown, starvation, terrorism, and drought. And of course, in addition to all that, we have to add the fact that international aid is not coming to the rescue of the Afghan people since the fall of Kabul in mid-August. Money that has been allocated to the Afghan people is frozen. $9.5 billion are still kept in American banks. The Afghan people are urging the donors to separate between them and the Taliban. But as long as the Taliban is not going to deviate from its traditional line, I don't see this is coming anytime soon. The recent announcement by the Taliban that they are going to ban music in cars and that every woman would have to be accompanied by a male companion if she goes over 72 kilometers from home, not to speak other laws that has been in, of course, valid at the time before the Taliban lost its control 20 years ago, suggest that the Taliban, despite all the illusions, is not going to change its traditional line.
Yes, and that's quite a concerning development. But in that moment of history for Afghanistan, in the crowd of events and in the rush of developments, I mean, what stood out for you as that sort of tide of Afghans we saw on television rushed to Kabul airport, for instance, as the Taliban swept into Kabul on August the 15th? What would you say was the dramatic example of a dramatic time?
I think that the key moment was when it became apparent that the Americans no longer have any interest to remain in Afghanistan. And this was the grave mistake that has been committed by President Biden last April, in which he named a date for the withdrawal of the American forces from the country to coincide with the anniversary of 9/11. This is when the Taliban knew that they are going to win. It became a question of time. And of course, the fall of Kabul had wider repercussions well beyond Afghanistan, because I think it hardened the position of Iran vis-a-vis the talks over the Iranian nuclear weapon. It encouraged President Putin to take a gamble over Ukraine, and it is also gave plenty of encouragement to China in its plot to take over Taiwan in one of the first coming years. So I think that the shambolic retreat of the Americans from Afghanistan will stay with us for many, many years, and we will feel it in other fronts on the international arena.
Yes, I'm inclined to agree with you that it certainly has had a knock-on effect on other parts of the world and other developments in the Middle East. But of course, I still see the images of some of the women and the children being hoisted over barriers and things, being given to American soldiers. Despite those cries of anguish and that palpable fear of most of those people, the world was still unable to come together to find a solution to that kind of fear.
Is quite acute, and I really don't envy decision makers in Europe or in Washington. They have to find a formula in which aiding the Afghan population would not mean assisting the nasty regime of the Taliban, meaning that assistance or engagement would not be interpreted as recognition of the Taliban. And as we know, not assisting the Afghan population had other repercussions, because the country is also blighted by terrorism, and it could be a starvation, which at the moment affects about 27 million Afghans, about 2/3 of the general population. Starvation can push people into the arms of the terrorists. And mind you, the Taliban still maintain contacts and links with Al-Qaeda and other jihadi groups in Afghanistan and neighboring countries like Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. It means that the Taliban is playing with the possibility that if the West would not come to the rescue of the Afghan people, which means also the rescue of the Taliban itself, the Taliban may not hesitate to activate the jihadi organizations against Western interests, and that means also an influx of more refugees into Europe. So the dilemma is, of course, double-fold. However, the Taliban has its own dilemma on the other side, because, of course, they don't want to be seen as being responsible for the upheavals that have been as a result of the takeover of Afghanistan. But the West does not want to release any frozen assets that will go straight into the Taliban pockets and would not benefit the population at large.
Dr. Zadka, with the Taliban's restrictive policies that you talked about, women's education, the right of women to work, issues around how they're going to fix the economy, how they're going to provide for their people, despite their promises and, rosy statements. I mean, can it be said that Afghanistan will, with every day, will get ever darker in 2022, or do you see a light at the end of the tunnel there?
Oh, I think that 2022 would be even much worse. The Taliban are saying, we are victorious. We conducted the blitzkrieg over Afghanistan. We took Kabul in no time. So we are not willing to be dictated by the United States or the European Union. We are here to dictate terms. We are not willing even to compromise over the women's rights. But the Taliban is not made of one opinion only. There is a certain power struggle within the organization. One can make a distinction between the people of moderate Kabul, so to speak, or militant Kandahar, or between the leadership outside, those who were negotiating an agreement 2 years ago in Qatar with representatives of Donald Trump administration, and those who are inside and they are pursuing a Salafist, purist brand, which means Afghanistan has to be an Islamic country without making any concession to Western values.
Dr. Saul Zadka, I want to thank you as always for your very incisive analysis. Dr. Saul Zadka there was talking to me not from England this time, but from France. Enjoy the rest of your holiday. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and around the world, bye-bye and thank you for watching.